This is Alvaro from Incarbo. Today I'm excited to show you guys the new trigger spring kit for the LC Carbine, also compatible for the LC Charger. Gonna open this guy up. The hammer spring, we're gonna include the trigger return spring, the sear spring with one of our aids to install that sear spring, the firing pin spring, and then it comes also with a 3D printed, very useful fixture for the firing pin spring installation. This really makes it very easily for you guys. For this installation, we're going to use safety glasses, a hammer, bench block, a bit of tape, punches, and then a 1/16 roll pin punch. First step, guys, as always, clear the firearm. Pull the bolt back, check the chamber, magazine well, and breech face. This gun is clear. We're going to do an average of a couple of pulls to see what's our reference. 4 pound, 8 ounces. 4 pounds, 4 ounces. 4 pounds, 5 ounces. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. And 4 pounds, 1 ounce. Very important, this gun has already been fired. Results will vary. Our starting trigger pull weight is around 4 to 5 pounds for the LC Carbine. So now we're gonna start with the installation. First of all is to remove the upper receiver from the lower. We're gonna go to this front pin. We're gonna grab our 1/8 punch to push this pin out. Just tap it out, not much strength there. For the lower receiver, we're just gonna tap it backwards. And the first thing we're gonna work on is the hammer spring, sear spring, trigger return spring. The upper is gonna be for the firing pin spring, but we're gonna work on this later. Let's put this away. The next step is to push these pins out that keep the fire control unit from the actual frame. Same thing, you can use a 1/8, very easy, no retention on that front pin. No retention on the back pin. Be careful here, because there's spring tension in the trigger bar, also in the slide lock. Slowly pull it out. Make sure you wear all your glasses. Right, you see how everything popped out? This is the trigger bar. And the first thing we're gonna do is just take that trigger bar off. It just comes real easy. Slide it through the sear. Should come out. So there's two different approaches there, depending on how confident you are. Most trigger pull weight reduction comes from the hammer spring and the trigger return spring. There is also a boost from the sear spring that makes it real nice. Both the trigger return spring and the hammer spring are very easy to install. Sear spring is a bit more challenging, so if you guys are not confident, you guys can always ship the gun to us and we can take care of the installation. It's pretty much a whole disassembly of this FCU. So look, that hammer spring just popped out. And then next step is to pop this roll pin out. That's where we're gonna be needing that 1/16 roll pin punch. I put my hand over the FCU and then I'm just gonna go ahead and tap it out. Don't go too aggressive with this. It's about hitting it in the right spot. Just be patient. There you go, it's out. In most guns, it won't be an issue. Just get a good roll pin punch and that pin should come out pretty easily. Okay, so once that roll pin is out, we're gonna get the safety mechanism, which is in itself the pin of the sear. We're just gonna roll it out slowly, because there's parts under tension. This is the left safety, and then the right safety is coming off. Okay, it's pretty easy right there. A lot of parts here, but just put them away. I'm gonna be explaining each part as we go, what it does and how to assemble it back. So finally, we got that sear spring and we got that sear. This is our first replacement. This is gonna be around 25% of the total trigger pull reduction. The sear spring is responsible for it, so definitely worth it. Gonna get a new sear spring. And then to make this installation easier, we include this PVC rod that's gonna save you some frustration. The orientation is key here. If you guys can see there, this is the orientation we need for that sear spring. That long leg is gonna be pointing outwards this way, with this leg of the sear pointing upward. To help us, we're gonna use a 30-second sponge, and we're gonna place it there on our bench block. This is gonna be our third arm in this operation. We're gonna put that PVC rod through it. It's gonna hold that sear spring inside the sear and help us assemble it in the FCU. So let's hold this on place. Here we have our FCU. This from section of the sear is the one that mates with the hammer, so it's gonna go forward, and we're gonna assemble it here in the FCU. This is the pin location for the FCU, so we're gonna align the hole of the sear with that hole location in the FCU. The front is also gonna dip down because we want to avoid the interference with that section of the FCU. Of course, this is going to be a bit easier for you guys because I have to show here in camera how to do it. There you go. Once we have aligned the sear spring, sear, and the PVC rod, we're going to use our third arm in the bench block to push that rod out and secure that whole position. There you go, right there. So the PVC rod is out. Sometimes it just takes some shaking to push that thing out, just because of that alignment of all three components. Once this punch is in, you can take that bench block and put everything horizontal again. So the next step is to get that sear pin, which is also the safety lever, and we're gonna put it through the hole using that rope pinch we just have secured. It's gonna be an easy. Same thing right there. And now I have the sear spring, sear, and the right safety lever assembled. It's time to put the left safety lever the same way we took it out. So we're gonna put it in, align both holes, and get our small roll pin. Just put it in with your hands as much as you can. And then once it's placed correctly, we're gonna get our 1/16 punch again. Same way. Using your left hand, if you're right, push the FCU down and exert some pressure so all the assembly stays in place while you punch it. And don't go very hard with it, just tap it in slowly, start very slowly. There you go. Keep going until that roll pin sits flush. So this is perfect. This is how you want that roll pin in. So it's time to assemble the hammer. This is our hammer and our hammer pin. The hammer is gonna sit in front of the sear. This is the hammer pin location. To assemble the hammer, we're gonna press that sear forward, and we're gonna get the hammer and insert it from the lower part. Slide it in until it coincides with the hammer pivot hole here. We're gonna get the hammer pin with the smaller ID here pointing outwards, and we're gonna drop it in that whole location. Make sure you align it properly. Right there. So now we have our hammer and sear already assembled. Following the hammer installation is the rocker arm. That cutout over there is gonna mate with the right safety. The right safety has an arm right there, and it's gonna ride on this section and rotate that rocker arm. So very easy. We're just gonna get the rocker arm, slide it into that section of the hammer pin, and then we're just gonna rotate just to check operation. You see how this thing rocks? No pun intended. Okay, so what happens with this thing, as soon as we turn it the other side, because we're gonna work on a detent that's located on the left side of the FCU, it's gonna pop out, and you guys are gonna hate it a lot. So best idea for this is just to get a bit of tape. Doesn't really matter what type of tape you guys are using. Doesn't have to be much. And you guys are gonna secure that rocker arm. Okay, it's not the most beautiful solution, but it works, and it makes the job a hell of a lot easier. So once we have that tape assuring that rocker arm, let's just check the operation is not compromised. Like there. We want some free operation because we need that rotation for the next part of the assembly. Just check that this doesn't fall out. Perfect. Okay, so next part is gonna be to drop that spring on that whole location. This is the detent spring for the safety lever. Right there. Next step is the detent. The detent will pivot in this whole location, and this part is a bit challenging, but bear with me because I have a trick for it as well. So we're gonna slide that part in, and as we rotate this part upwards, you're gonna see that that detent is gonna want to pop out. So what we're gonna do to assemble it is the opposite. We're gonna wanna push that detent using a punch, pushing it like that, and then we're gonna rotate it as we push there until we hear a click like that. So that went in pretty easily, but sometimes it's gonna kick out, and you're just gonna have to press that detent in until it clicks. And once this thing clicks in, let's check operation. You can take the tape off, and hallelujah, the sear is in. Okay, so now you guys should be proud that you put the sear spring in, and this is gonna reduce quite a bit the trigger pull weight by itself. Nice thing about this installation, this part of the sear, is that it won't pop out. So this part of the firearm is already unlocked. Next part is going to be the trigger return spring. So as we always say with trigger return springs, it's an option for you guys. For me, it's pretty nice because you can get another half a pound reduction with it. But if you prefer a more snappier trigger pull weight on the way back, a more snappier reset, you can leave the OEM in. That said, the reduction is not significant enough to feel a sluggish reset, but it's a question of preference. My opinion, I like low triple weight, so I like to change it up. To substitute the trigger turn spring, we're gonna have to take the trigger out. And as with most Ruger pistols, there's a trigger pivot pin right there that needs to be disassembled. So easiest way is to turn the FCU the opposite way and just tap it, shake that trigger until the whole thing pops out. Sometimes this is not as easy, so if you're not able to take that pin out, you're gonna have to punch that roll pin of the safety of the trigger, and then from the bottom you'll have access through that hole in the trigger, and just press that pin out with your smaller punch, and it will pop right out like it just did. Okay, so good news, we have that out. Here's the OEM trigger return spring. We're gonna substitute that one for our TRS right here. So this is a side-by-side comparison. Ours says sing playing it music while. Very good corrosion resistant, so you won't see the spring rust. So to reassemble the trigger, very easy. First step is just to put the trigger in, and then we're gonna put the pivot pin in. the pivot pin just goes through the pivot hole in the trigger, like that. Shake it in. And now it's the turn for the trigger return spring. The orientation is key here. This loop is going to point upwards on that arm, and this leg is going to be pointing more or less at 5 o'clock, like that. So once that spring is in, we have to put the pivot pin back inside. So the best way to do is just to align everything perfectly. We can see through that hole. We can see the hole in the trigger, hole in the actual trigger pivot, and then we're just gonna drop it right there and tap it with a punch, like that. Just to check if you did it correctly, you're just gonna pull lightly on that trigger return spring, and if it doesn't come out, it means it's retained by the actual pin. Okay, that's done. So now it's the turn for the hammer spring. This is how it comes from factory. This is the hammer toggle. Instead of mating with the actual legs like in the Ruger 5.7, you got that hammer toggle that mates directly with the Sear. We're gonna substitute this spring with our lower poundage spring. It's very nice. This is the biggest factor on the trigger pull weight, so very good addition. If you're not wanting to fight with a Sear, you can just put that hammer spring and the firing pin spring. Very important. Never put the hammer spring without putting the firing pin spring, because you may experience light strikes. So this is our hammer spring, and we're gonna just mate it with the hammer toggle like that as OEM, and then we're just gonna slide it in. How this goes inside the FCU is that hammer has a cutout there. The hammer toggle is gonna mate with the cutout in the hammer, like that. So again, so you guys can see, this is the orientation. The flat section is gonna point forward. The curved concave here is gonna point towards the back, like that. And then we're gonna get our hammer pin and just secure that hammer on the hammer pin. Just check operation, there you go. Nothing is correct. Make sure you put it horizontal like that, because then the pin will pop out if you don't. Next step is the trigger bar. The trigger bar, this will mate with the pivot in the trigger, and then this is gonna slide here and mate with the Sear. So this is the orientation for install, like that. And we're just gonna install it. We're gonna slide it like that. We're gonna twist it, rotate it this way, and then slide it under the Sear, like that. And then we're gonna mate with the pivot. Let me hold it like that, so you guys can see. I'm holding right now the hammer pin so it doesn't pop out. And I mated it with this pin location in the pivot of the trigger. Okay, next step. We're getting very close at finishing the lower of this firearm. Next step is going to be your bolt catch. The first step is going to be installing the bolt catch spring, like that. This boss is going to go through the spring and into that bigger hole. But very important, that spring has to push against the lever, so don't put it upwards, because then there will be no spring tension. You have to both first put it here and then make sure that the spring is pushing against that section of the bolt catch. So final step before assembling the FCU in the frame is going to tension that trigger return spring on the trigger bar. So very important to have your safety glasses on here, because this trigger bar can pop out anytime if you don't do it right. So my trick is to hold at the same time. I won't turn it all the way there, because that pin the hammer spring is gonna just slide out. So I hold bolt catch and the trigger bar at the same time, and then I'm just gonna rotate that spring and set it up on the trigger bar like that. Do not let go of the trigger bar, if not it's gonna pop out. Just hold it with your right arm as you wish, but keep that in tension so the whole assembly doesn't pop out. So now we are ready to put this back on the firearm. Let's get the frame, and then how this is gonna sit, that spring is gonna sit on the frame, on that slant over there. So it's very important to get that FCU and not just slide it vertically like that. You have to kind of cant it and then press it down like that. So let's try. Make sure all the pins are flush, everything looks good. If not, you're gonna have to try this a couple of times and you're not gonna like it. Another good trick is also to release the hammer so that the tension on the spring is lower. Also makes the whole process way easier. So we're gonna slide it like this in position. Now we're gonna depress the trigger at the same time so it can slide in, and that went in pretty easily. So we're gonna press that FCU against the frame. We're gonna go and get our retaining pins back. Use the hammer, maybe just the side of the plastic so we don't mar anything. Like that, 1 and 2. Make sure these pins sit flush. You can use a punch to make sure everything is flush. Okay, now both retaining pins are flush. Very important, so we can put the upper afterwards. So good news, now we have the Sear spring, hammer spring, and the trigger turn spring. All of those 3 springs are gonna be responsible for the trigger pull weight. To the upper receiver, before we go and work on the upper receiver, let's check operation and see if the hammer releases. I like to put my finger on the hammer so it doesn't smack the ejector and damage the actual part. Okay, it looks like it's releasing. You can already see that reduced strength on the hammer. It's gonna really help that drop. For the upper receiver, the only part we need to work on is the actual bolt. So this firearm has 2 bolts that mate together. We only need the one that's towards the rear. How we're gonna do is just press that out as we push forward on the butt pad. And then we're just gonna pull it out like that. This part is where we're gonna use our fixture. We're gonna use it for both disassembly and then reassembly. The shape of it is designed so this rounded section in the back and this cutout has to be towards the back of the bolt. Since the firing pin, here, that's the firing pin, is in tension, this is gonna help you hold that firing pin tension and not have to use your hand and twist it around. It's gonna be real easy. So how this goes in is this way. This cutout towards the back, and it's gonna click in that way. It's that location of that hole, which is the hole for the retaining pin for the firing pin. We're gonna punch that roll pin out. This roll pin will come out from this side, and then it will be reassembled from this side. So disassemble, we're gonna punch through this side using a 1/16 roll pin. Punch, press that in. So let's just punch it out using our brass section of the hammer. Like that, very easy. Then we can take the fixture out. We're gonna be left with the firing pin. And then there's a firing pin spring there that sometimes gets stuck. What you can use is a 1/16 punch. And you slide it out like that. There you go. So that's the OEM firing pins, very stiff. We're gonna substitute this for our firing pin spring. The same way it came out, we're gonna put it in. We're gonna get that spring, put it through the thinner section of the firing pin like that. Very important. The orientation matters because it has this cutout here. This cutout has to be oriented towards you. That whole location is also not centered, it's also offset towards this side. And we're gonna orient it with this cutout in the firing pin. We get that firing pin with that cutout looking towards me. We're gonna slide it in slowly. And then we're gonna get the fixture, and this face is gonna press against the firing pin like that, and then click. Hold it in tension and see if that hole is aligned with the cutout. It looks good. Now you can turn it around and hold the bolt downwards, just so you can keep the tension on the firing pin. And then we're gonna get that roll pin and slide it back in. So it's gonna drop on that hole. Since you have a bigger hole here, you can use a bigger roll pin. This is a 5/64 roll pin. Until you feel like it's pretty solid, it means that that roll pin is already bottomed out on the other side. So if we did good, as we turn it out, the firing pin is not gonna have tension anymore with the fixture, so it will pop out easily. And we can check that firing pin operation. Just depress it. You should see the firing pin tip protrude there in the breech face. So just press it. Just check that there's no obstructions. By the way, if you're doing this with already shot firearm, it's a good opportunity to clean all your components inside, especially the firing pin. You don't want any debris, you don't want any dirt there, so you can use any of our cleaning tools to do that job and make your firearm as reliable as possible. Okay, it looks good. So it's time to put everything in the gun. To assemble this part of the bolt, it's gonna be the same way as we disassembled it. So body against the butt pad, and then we're gonna pull backwards like that, and then just drop the bolt in. It mates, this section of the bolt mates with that cutout in the front bolt like that, and then you can release the charging handle. Final step is to reassemble the lower into the upper. And how this is gonna work is you're gonna put the lower towards the back like that, and then you're gonna slightly tap it forward until it clicks in, and then we're gonna put that retaining pin that will hold the upper with the lower receiver like that. Just that spring section. Doesn't really matter if it's forward or backward. I normally put it forward, so like that, tap it in. The firearm is ready. Oh yeah, you can already feel I can even shoot this with my pinky pretty much. This is a very significant trigger pull weight reduction. This spring kit is gonna boost your accuracy and make everything more enjoyable. It's very well worth it. Okay, let's see how much we have reduced from the starting trigger pull weight. Gonna do another 5 pulls. 2 pounds 11 ounces. 2 pounds 14 ounces. 2 pounds 13 ounces. 3 pounds. 2 pounds 12 ounces. For an average of 2 pounds 13 ounces, guys. This is very light. This is awesome trigger pull weight reduction. As always, there's going to be variations. We have received LC Carbine sitting at trigger pull weights more than 5 pounds, and we are now sitting slightly under 3 pounds. And you guys are gonna love it. This is an awesome trigger pull weight reduction. Get your spring kit now at TIMECODES and start enjoying your LC Carbine or your charger and take it to a whole different level. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you're having some trouble, feel free to give us a call and send in your LC Carbine or charger so we can install the spring kit for you. And also be sure to check out our new support site at support.mcarbo.com.